You're listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour.
From the chilly plains of the Midwest, welcome to the Radio Hour podcast. I'm your host, Justin Beahm. Today's episode is with director Michael Cooney, who made the iconic Jack Frost in 1997. I talked to Michael years ago when I did an interview with him for Fangoria, and it ended up, I can't remember what issue it was in, but it was exciting for me because I'm a huge fan of this film, a huge fan of Apex. If you remember the distributor Apex, they did stuff like The Surgeon and Uncle Sam, of course Jack Frost and Jack Frost 2. When video stores were in their heyday and a lot of direct-to-video labels were popping up, Apex really seemed to take the front seat, and they did it with something very simple. And this is something that Michael and I touch on in this interview, lenticular covers. I'm sure even if you haven't seen these films, the two that first come to mind are Uncle Sam and Jack Frost. It was a great concept because at that time, you wanted to catch the eye of whoever was in the video store. And what better way than with some sort of cool cover? Like, there were others, like I remember Dead Pit, for example, had these ghouls crawling out of the grave, and one of them had glowing red eyes when you pushed a button on the front of the case. I always loved finding that case, although many of them were broken by the time I came across them, like where the button was, or some people had pushed in the front cover because it was kind of a relief image as well, like a plastic relief image. But these lenticular covers that Apex was doing, and I still have my original Jack Frost tape from back then, you look at it and it kind of follows you as you walk by it on the shelf, but the image transitions. So with Jack Frost, when you stand on the left side, it's a pretty innocent-looking snowman. Then you take a step to your right, and it becomes monstrous Jack Frost with his frozen fang teeth and arched stick eyebrows and green eyes. Brilliant stuff, and it really made these videotapes stand out on the shelf. Video stores were like an art museum in a lot of ways, although we were unaware of what we were renting at that time. At least I was. I was never really in the know. I did check magazines like Fangoria and eventually got to the point where I would work through that shopping list, often with my friend Shane Bundy. He and I would team up and try to check as many of those off as we could, going to every video rental place in the area that we could find. But prior to that, it was just impulse. It was blind renting, which is something that people now do through streaming, where you just see the cover, maybe a little synopsis, and think, oh, I'll dive in on this. But back then, that cover art was everything. And I didn't even mind when it oversold a movie or when it told straight up lies. I remember some of them would have promo images on the back cover because the video package had been put together prior to the film being finished. And sometimes you'd see shots that weren't in the final film, or you'd see shots that weren't meant to be part of a publicity package. Like I think it was Slumber Party Massacre 2 that on the back cover had an image of a stunt being performed, and it's clear it's a stunt man in like a burn suit with a mask on and stuff. Anyway, it was always very exciting, and we didn't know what the hell we were renting, and it was a thrill to load your arms with as many tapes as you could find, head home with your friends, especially like my brother and I would rent as many as we could for the weekend. And then we would just try to get through as many as we could before heading back to school on Monday. It was a real thrill, and Apex was at the heart of that. They really, at a time when direct-to-video horror was at its peak, they were putting out indie productions like Jack Frost that it seemed no one else would want to touch. And that's always held a really soft spot in my heart, Jack Frost. It's a hilarious movie, infinitely quotable, infinitely rewatchable. It's always part of my winter roll every year. There have been DVD and Blu-ray releases of it over the years since that videotape many moons ago. And I encourage everyone to dive in on Jack Frost this year. Even if you've seen it before, give it another look and, make that part of your snowy season watching. When it's cold here, it doesn't take long for me to immediately start watching winter horror. I'm a real junkie for winter stuff. So Snow Beast and The Shining and on and on and on. Storm of the Century is a fantastic one that also has an amazing commentary, by the way, that Stephen King is on. And I love all Stephen King commentaries. But, and I guess as an aside, related note, the TV series of The Shining also has a couple great releases on video. And both that and Storm of the Century have just incredible audio commentaries on them that King is part of. Can't recommend both of those highly enough. But this chat with Michael Cooney, I think it's really fun and informative. I love digging this stuff out of the archives, and I hope you guys are enjoying when I get to pull these old interviews and present them in full, because, of course, what lands on the page is always ultimately kind of a fraction of what the full conversation included. So I remember this was part of a column when it landed, and I don't think it got a whole lot of real estate in the magazine. So, I mean, it was just really a small bit of what Michael and I covered in total, which is presented for you here on this episode. The voicemail topic for this episode that I also posed on social media, just look for Justin Beahm or the Justin Beahm Radio Hour, wherever you are on social media, was what were your favorite physical media movie releases of 2024? And I got an amazing response. I got a number of voicemails. We also have lots of input from social, and we'll go through that later on in this episode. And I have a special guest popping in for that discussion as well. My friend Anthony C. Ferrante, who put me in the water and had me get attacked by a shark in Sharknado, joins me for a little bit of a discussion on his favorite picks from 2024. Anthony always has his finger on the pulse of what's coming out, and he and I talk all the time. I mean, every week, at least once or twice, about so many things, and it often turns to what's new from the different labels. There's so much stuff coming out now, and 2024 was another banner year in this regard. There's so many boutique labels in addition to some studio releasing that's really incredible right now. So I use the term golden age, and I really think it is, and it has been for some time, where there are titles being unearthed that we never thought would get the deluxe treatment. And here they are getting full-fledged box sets with booklets and lobby card reproductions and tchotchkes and all kinds of fun stuff. And Anthony has a great list of his picks for 2024. And then, of course, we'll get to those voicemails and the social media comments on this. And there are some titles that pop up in a lot of people's comments over and over again that you're not going to want to miss. So stay tuned after the Michael Cooney conversation for all of that fun about the best physical media releases of 2024. I want to also make mention here of the Radio Hour Patreon, which is now maybe about a month into existing, and I'm getting the hang of it. There's some videos on there. There's also some behind-the-scenes pictures from the production of my documentary Cooksey, which is underway right now, and a bunch of other fun stuff. You can also have the chance to pitch in with interview questions for upcoming interview subjects. You can get a subscription service from me where I'm sending you a vintage horror magazine every month directly from my collection. There's also options in there that include me sending you 4Ks and Blu-rays, things like that. There's so much there. If you go to patreon.com/the Justin Beahm Radio Hour or just search for my name on there, you'll find it. And it really means the world. I've decided to kind of step away from trying to go the traditional route with advertising for right now. And I am most excited about the interactive aspects of this whole thing. And those of us that are a part of it are having a hell of a lot of fun there. So check out the Radio Hour Patreon, and I do appreciate your support of the show. My website is justinbeahm.com. You can sign up for the mailing list on there, and anytime I have a post, it'll shoot you a quick email. And what I post on there are updates about projects, announcements about things. Sometimes if I have an exclusive sale on some of the merchandise over on the Redbubble page, or the Steve Reverb CD, which is on sale right now with free shipping, you can get a note about that in your inbox. So I don't spam you. I don't overwhelm you. Just keeping you up to date with the news and all the latest on Reverend Entertainment and the Radio Hour. That's justinbeahm.com. Let's get into that conversation with Michael Cooney. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you on the other side. Let's begin with a little bit about you. I understand you're from England with a background in theater.
Yes, yeah. My family has been the theater business since I was a little boy. My dad is a writer and an actor and a producer and a director, West End and all over the world. And so I grew up in the theater business, yes.
And what were you doing creatively before Jack Frost?
I really I started off not really being creative. I can't spell, so thank goodness for spell check on computer. I still to this day cannot spell something. I was always good at math, and at the school that I was at, if you were good at one thing, you were accelerated in that, and nothing else mattered. And so I went through my schooling being told that I couldn't write. What they meant was I couldn't spell, and it was only after I left school, and I was the first thing I ever did was when I was 17. It was just before I went to college, and I had the summer off, and I was at home, and I had this idea that I wanted to write, and it turned into this enormous fantasy adventure novel. It was ridiculously long, something like 700 pages long, but it was like I'd opened something up, this spout just poured out, and I didn't know how to stop it at all. And that was the first, and I went, oh, this is fun. I sort of messed around doing different things, but I was still governed by the fact that I was very good at math, and so I was going to go to university to become a teacher. And for some I can't remember quite how it happened, but I thought for a moment I wanted to be an actor. And for my parents who were both in the theater, that was this sort of wonderful moment. Oh, thank goodness he doesn't want to be a teacher. He doesn't want to do something sense. Yeah, he really wants to be an actor. And so they thoroughly supported me in that. And I came out to Los Angeles to go to acting school, and it turns out I'm a terrible actor. and I found this out on literally the first week of drama school at Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute. They put you on film, and they played it back, and it was just awful. And I didn't know by this time I'd left England telling everyone I was going to be the next Tom Cruise or whatever I thought I was going to be. And so, oh no, I'm out on a 2-year visa. What am I going to do? I suck. And the first thing I think I did was blame the monologues I was doing. So I started to write my own monologues. And the acting didn't improve, but I remembered that I loved writing. And I started to write more and more, and wrote a little play that I think we did at the Strasberg at some sort of improv performance night, whatever it was. And I had friends at the time who wanted to be producers, and they said, you should write a screenplay. And I said, well, I've never done that. And I read a bunch of screenplays and said, well, I think I can do that, much to my chagrin. And I started writing screenplays, and the first ones were terrible, and they got a little bit better and a little bit better. But I just wrote and wrote. I must have written 15, 20 screenplays before they were actually presentable. But that's what I was. And at the same time, my friends who they wanted to be producers, they were making music videos and commercials. And so I was working with them, doing whatever I could. They made one commercial for Hawaiian Airlines, and they had, in the Hawaiian Airlines, a little girl is sitting at a desk, and she makes a paper airplane, and she flies this paper airplane, and it says future Hawaiian Airlines pilot. And I like to fold paper, and so I had to make 500 paper airplanes for this commercial. It was just anything I could do, because by this time, I'd just fallen in love with movies and the idea of making movies and writing for it and doing anything I could.
And you really made your film debut with Jack Frost in terms of directing. Yes. And how did that project come about?
It's sort of fun what happened with Jack Frost. Jack Frost, the first thought was that it was going to be, it was right at the time when the digital effects of the T-1000 of Terminator 2 had come out.
Right.
And we came up with this idea of what about a killer that was made of all the elements of water? It would be snow and ice and steam, and it could do all these amazing things. And so when I first wrote it, we were thinking this was going to be quite a big budget movie with all these digital effects and whatever. And it didn't sell. It didn't sell as that. And someone phoned us up about a year after we'd put it to bed, said, well, can you make it for under $1 million? And we said, well, of course you can. Lying karate. And yeah, of course you can do anything, of course you can. My producer friend said that Michael should direct it because that's a good way to save money because you don't have to pay him anything, which was fine because I got to get behind a camera. And so what happened was we then had this script that was full of these digital effects and all these things that you just couldn't do on the budget. So that was the first thing that happened, is we had to streamline the script for this extremely low budget. The next thing that happened was that we actually saw the snowman. Way at the beginning of pre-production, it was still in our heads that we could make quite a nasty horror movie, and there were some good kills in there, and we could have this very nasty snowman. And then we saw it. And there's a long, confusing story about how we spent all our money at this one company, and they were meant to make 3 or 4 different Jack Frosts, and they just made the one Jack Frost. They made the 3 balls of snow. And we had no money to make any more. And we looked at this and went, oh my God, that's not scary. and fortunately, this was before we had actors. This was quite early on in pre-production. And we went, we're going to have to rethink what we're going to do. We're just going to have to embrace it. I think we'd put about $50,000 of our seed money into this company. Wow. It was a long disaster. So, it was a disaster. And it was literally 3 balls of foam. And one of the transpo coordinator, whose name is Brett Voidston, the transpo coordinator, who now 20 years later is my best friend in the world, he remembers to this day, he was there, he remembers to this day the look on my face when I walked into whatever warehouse it was and saw the snowman. I went, oh my goodness, this is not what and it's the only snowman. I said, it's meant to have people's faces off. And I said, we'll stick some fangs in its mouth. I said, oh no. So we had to do some rethinking. And one of the, and I hope that I embraced it well, because people who get the movie and know that there is a charm to it understand what we were making. And one of the first things that we did is we thought about the casting, and we cast our lead, Chris Allport, who this very straight, good actor, and then we populated the world with goofballs. That there's this lovely, all these characters that surround it. So there is this sort of this charm just to the actors itself, that you can tell that this isn't a serious piece, that everybody embraced it. So that those were sort of the beginnings of it, and that's when we knew that we'd be able. It's not that it's tongue in cheek, because I don't think it is in any way mean spirited to the genre. It is not a spoof of the genre, and the hope is that there is just a charm to it.
So initially, you had planned for a more vicious film, and the suit changed your approach, or was the script always written this way with all that humor built into it?
No, the humor came on rewrite. The humor came once we saw the snowman.
Okay, so initially you did have a pretty straight approach.
Yes, yeah, it was a pretty straight approach, and it was set in a city. It was set in Denver, and it was in a skyscraper. And it was because we thought the original script had much more. It started off in a small town and then went to a city. That there was much more to it than when we realized we had less than $1 million to make it. We cut it down enormously. And
despite the sort of absurd subject matter, you managed to attract just an amazing cast. You mentioned Chris Allport. So you have Scott McDonald, on and on. How did these people respond to the material when you approached them with it?
They understood what we were doing. The actors were fantastic. The production was fraught with disasters. There's numerous war stories. The actors were all fantastic. They understood, because they looked at this as a 26-year-old goofball director who believed with all his heart that I was so adamant that this was the way to do it, and they trusted me, and that's all you can ask of an actor, is that. And even when they walked in and saw the snowman, that they trusted me that I'd be able to find this balance of humor and horror.
And what do you remember about bringing Shannon Elizabeth on board. That was her screen debut. And what was your initial impression of her?
She was a sweetheart, an absolute sweetheart. She was terrific to work with, and she was bubbly and fun, and everybody loved her on the set. She was just terrific. And there's I forget the young boy, Darren, who played Tommy.
Darren Campbell. Yeah.
Yes, Darren Campbell. What I was able to do is I was able to mix and match in the audition process, and when those two acted together, it was just this lovely little bit. And the fraught with disaster part is that the company that was going to make the movie that funded us went bankrupt during pre-production. What we realized was that we had complete autonomy, that we could do whatever we wanted to do, because the money, it was the bank, the bank was making the movie, and all the bank wanted was 90 minutes of film in a DVD package. So we were given that's all of the casting was just, it was myself and the two hands-on producers, Vicky Slotnick and Jeremy Page. That was the three of us. And we didn't have to run anything through anybody. It was quite a luxury to have. And so, no, but Shannon was terrific. And I remember, she was very game for anything, as you can tell in the movie.
And clearly it wasn't made during winter. When and where was the film shot?
Well, it was. I mean, this is part of the fraught with disaster war stories. The exteriors were shot in Big Bear in January. In Big Bear is about 2 hours outside of Los Angeles, up the top of in the San Bernardino Mountains.
Okay.
And there has been snow in Big Bear in January. I think at the time there had been 60 years of snow in January. Well, we had 85-degree Santa Ana winds, and every day they said the snow's coming, and the snow never came. And so all these grand vistas we were going to have, they got narrower and narrower. And the budget for the snow, what is it that we used? The cotton balls that were the snow that flaps about whenever the wind blows in the shots. Mm-hmm. This stuff got dirtier and dirtier as we collected it, because we didn't have any money to buy any new cotton. And so as we went on filming, it got dirtier. And there was I said it's okay, because one of the shots that we shot right at the very end comes near the beginning of the movie, where human Jack Frost escapes from the back of the truck, and there's the accident where he's melted into the snow by genetic acid. Yeah. This was shot at night, and we'd found this beautiful location, and we saved all our money. I don't know what it cost, but we had sort of $5,000 left in the budget to use foam. And I said, it's okay, because what we'll do is we'll establish this big shot of foam, and it'll be good, because that'll set up everybody for the rest of it. All afternoon, they're spraying this foam on this mountain, and it looks glorious. It looks absolutely wonderful. And night comes, and it's beautiful. We get the shot ready, and all the foam melts, and there's no foam. And I say to the foam guy is looking bewildered by this, not understanding what's going on. And I said, why is there no foam? And he said, I don't understand. This is the foam that you put on the runway when you're trying to land the plane. And I said, well, there's the problem. We're not trying to land the plane. We want the foam that looks like snow that stays there all night.
Oh, no.
These are the sort of things that just went on and on in the production. I think we shot it in, I was trying to remember, it was like 94 we shot it.
Okay.
Yeah, or 93, even 93, 94, because again, if you look on IMDb, there's a number of distribution production companies. This went through a number of hands. There was a bankruptcy sale. It sold to somebody else, and I think Apex finally picked it up. But it wasn't released immediately. It took a moment. It sat in the banker's vault for a moment. But I think it was 94. It might have been. It was either 93, 94, around that Christmas time, or 94, 95. I think it was 93, 94.
one scene in particular that is pretty famous in the film is Shannon Elizabeth in the tub. And despite the lighthearted music and cuts, the scene is actually kind of dark in concept in its approach. Was there any hesitation involved with anyone on that, or I mean, what was the story behind that shot?
Yeah, there's a story that it's funny that you said in concept, because written in the script, he freezes around Shannon Elizabeth, freezes and smacks her head into the wall until she's dead. That is how he kills her. Mm-hmm. We come to film it, and the carrot in the first take would do bang forward, and it hits Shannon in the eye, very nasty. Oh. So we take the carrot out, and we don't. When we filmed it, we go, oh, sorry, oh, are you all right? So all this goes on. Take the carrot out, film it. Of course, we can't use the first takes of the carrot. So we put it together, and in the editing room, people are walking up and going, you know what that looks like, don't you? I said, oh, no, I do know what it looks like now. Now you mention it. It wasn't in concept. It was it evolved. And again, it was one of those things that we had to embrace of, do we do this? I mean, that's what it looks like. It's going to be very difficult to sell it any other way. There's no carrot. Where's the carrot? And so then in the voiceovers, I think there is the line, was it good for you too, honey, comes to the end.
Right.
So by that time, we had to embrace it. But for my sensibilities, I still would, I like to try and defend that it's not a snowman rape scene. I like to try and defend that. I haven't got a leg to stand on, I realize that. but I like to try and defend that. Because if you notice, there's no nudity. Shannon was nude to film it, but everything's hidden. There's no nudity. There's no boobs. There's nothing that you do see a lot in this sort of movie. And there's not. I didn't think it was necessary. That was one of those ones that was engineered backwards.
You bring up a point that I actually wanted to ask you about, that the film isn't particularly bloody, and the more gratuitous forms, aspects you normally find in these films are absent as well. And Shannon Elizabeth, who clearly doesn't have an issue with nudity, it's everything shot very carefully in that sequence. Was the lack of gore and nudity an artistic or a financial decision on your part?
I always thought that we might be able to get away with a PG-13. I thought we might be able to, but that was a very naive 26-year-old. That was not at all. I should have known going into that a kill a snowman is you're going to get your R rating just from the word go. Yeah. So that I think that's what governed it. Is that you and again. I think by the time, and this came from seeing the snowman and then casting around that and giving it this very slight dark charm, is that I don't think I wanted to dwell too much. I mean, there's a lot going. I'm thinking of after Billy Metzner gets his head cut off by the sled.
Yeah.
There's a shot of when they're body bagging him. There's a long tracking shot of everyone all sad and they're covering the body, but one of the deputies walks by with a large clear baggie with a head in it, and it's silly stuff. And there was conversations about, well, how much blood do you want? And there's just a little bit of blood at the bottom of the baggie, just about an inch of blood at the bottom of the baggie.
Oh, these are all the things I love this film for.
People get it. They get that there's a lot going on, and there's. I mentioned Brett Boydston, who was the transpo coordinator, who's now our best mate. He is in the movie about 6 times. There is a character called Idiot, and this was because we didn't have any money for extras. So I said, okay, and Brett was the transpo coordinator. So I said, okay, instead of having a lot of extras, we'll have half a dozen extras throughout, but we'll have one extra who is ridiculous. And so I think he appears about 6 times in the movie. And he is in a bright orange parka, and whatever is happening in the scene, he's doing the wrong thing. There's the big town meeting where, oh, what's happening? People are dying. We've got to do something. It's okay. The FBI are on the way. It's one of those big town meetings. And in the background, there's this character, Idiot, played by Brett Boydston, and he's got his orange parka on, and he's carrying balloons and presents, and it's with a sign saying "Happy Birthday, Beth."
Yeah.
And he's there for the wrong reason. And it happens throughout. He starts checking his map at one. I think, and he wandered in the shop. There's a very sort of touching scene going on, attempted as a touching scene, where somebody's talking about the Jack Frost. Is the family doing okay? That Jack Frost was meant to be executed last night, and in the background, Idiot walks out of a shop with a 5-foot Christmas decoration, completely drawing your attention.
Did you end up really only having one Jack Frost to work with? I mean, there were different versions of him, like when he got melted and all of that. Was there just one basic Jack Frost, though?
Yes, it was one basic Jack Frost, and I think we had one head that had a big sort of open Kermit mouth to it, and that's what we put fangs in. When he bites off one of the federal agent's face, we put fangs in his face. But yes, I think there was one body, and I think we had either 2 or 3 heads, because there was this right at the very last shot, and it was great fun to do it, was there's the scene where we blow up the police station. We have the aerosol cans and we blow up the police station.
Right.
And there is in the sort of the shot of it blowing up, there is a close-up of the snowman bursting into flames.
Yeah.
And we were down to one grubby snowman. We had to make sure we would never need him again. And I think we shot it, in hindsight, in a ridiculous location. It was in a warehouse, but we literally doused him with gasoline and threw a match on him and filmed it. And so, but we had to make sure that we didn't need any other takes of anything. And it was the final shot of of production. What
kind of challenges did you face dealing with that, with the snowman itself, the prop and the suit?
The suit, I think and again, this is from me from what I'd seen in my head and thinking that it was going to be a T-1000, T-1000
yeah, right.
effect. The struggle was he didn't move, and even I think there were 2 bodies. There was one with the arms by his side, and there was one that had arms that could move, and then there was a couple of sort of spare arms for close-ups. And we realized that there was an actor inside, and his movements were very limited. And so you could never, if you had gone into production thinking you were going to get a shot of the snowman approaching or the snowman moving or along, you could never get these things. I think the only time we actually see him moving is the "Look, Ma, I'm a Picasso" after it explodes and he puts himself back together all strangely.
Yeah.
And he says, "Look, Ma, I'm a Picasso," and you actually see him moving along, and that was shot in time lapse because the actor inside was sort of shuffling along on his feet and could only move very slowly, and so we shot that, and then I think we either shot it time lapse and then sped it up or whatever we did in post. But I think that's the only time you really see him. But it was the fact that he was enormous in the frame. The very first thing we ever shot was the Tommy character who is killed in the kitchen, and this is Darren again. Tommy, he stabs him with the ice. Yeah, and the world's most pissed off snowman.
Yeah,
that, and it was the first time we'd actually filmed the snowman with an actor, and it was impossible to frame. I remember thinking, this is crazy. If you got wide enough to film it, and so that's why a lot of it is very, which again I think it works in the end movie, is that we were then forced to shoot the sort of longer lenses, compressing things. You just saw pieces of the snowman. There's never ever a big shot of the snowman doing any of these deeds. The only time we really it's a great. We unfortunately ended up, because it just seemed to flow better, cutting it, and I think it's either 2 or 3 shots. The sequence, the shot at the end where we go out of a window and into the back of a truck filled with antifreeze.
Yeah.
There is actually, it is done in one shot, and I am so impressed by our stunt coordinator, whose name is Kurt Bryant, I think, and he's actually the guy doing it, and he is jumping out of an upper story window through glass, holding a 7-foot snowman, and timing it that the truck backs up and he jumps out into it. It is actually done in one shot, and I think the reason why he had a cord on him, and in the one shot you can definitely see that he had a cord, but he does it. He leaps out of a window with a 7-foot foam snowman and goes into. I mean, it's pretty clever what he does.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, and that's a funny scene. I can see your house from up here. There's so many little moments like that throughout. And one of my favorite sequences in the film is about a quarter of the way in, where the sheriff's called to the frozen body that's out back in the chair, and the dummy.
Take your foot off.
Yeah, would you take your foot?
Doing that?
Oh, it's brilliant, and and the way you shot that from back behind the body up into their faces, so you couldn't see anything below their like chest down. It just works so well, and that prop was really great. Was that Screaming Mad George who made that?
Well, the Screaming Mad George didn't actually do a lot of the work. He farmed it out. This was part of the "Where's our money gone on us?"
Yeah.
But no, that was something that Mike Deek, who has done. If you look up Mike Deek, and he has done a lot of work, a lot of special effects. I think he might have just pulled that out of the back of his truck and said, "Here's your dead body," and then it was perfect. It was great. I think we iced it up a little bit, but that shot is all part of embracing this production that was incredibly cheap and incredibly fast. That I didn't have time for coverage. So one of the things I said is every time we're covering a dead body, I'm going to do it in one shot. That is one shot. Looking at the dead body when she's strapped up to the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
It's the POV of the Christmas tree. There's something called puddle cam. That what I did is I said, okay, we will spend an hour making an interesting shot, but that's it. That is the shot. We're not going to go in for coverage. That's how we're going to make the time up. And so. And if you ever, I don't know if you ever look at the movie again, but one of the things I point out to people before they watch it, that scene that you're talking about, one of the nice little pieces of direction that I gave to the actor is always look at the wrong actor. And it's this funny piece, and it just that Chris Allport, whoever's talking, he's not looking at, and it's not something you usually see, but it just gives it this slight quirkiness. That he's not looking at the right actor.
Where did you get this sense of humor?
It's my dad. It's my dad who that's what he. I grew up, as I said, in theater business, and what he does is he writes comedies. He has written British farces since before I was born. That's what his life is. So I grew up around a lot of very funny English people, and yeah, I think that's what gives it to you. And then I had a big brother who liked to tease me by making me watch horror movies. So between the two of them, I think I've got this sort of darker sense of humor. What
were some of the horror films that made a big impact on you?
I think the one is Friday the 13th. I think that is, and I can remember my brother making me watch this movie, and in particular, I believe I'm right that it's Kevin Bacon with the spear up through the throat when he's lying in bed. Yeah. And I remember watching that, and part of my brain going, "This is the most terrifying thing." And indeed, when I lived up in Big Bear for a moment, and I built a bed up in Big Bear, and I put 4 inches of timber under my bed because that scene so affected me. So there is that part of me that was absolutely terrified, and yet I was looking at it going, wow, so that's a fake body, and they're pushing something up, and there was two parts working, and I was absolutely fascinated by how the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
But those are the influence, and then the lovely Sam Raimi movies and the Evil Deads and all those great movies.
Which did a good job of blending humor.
Yeah, I think he's a genius. I think Sam Raimi, and just the way. But I wanted to be able to be as inventive as him with the camera, but we didn't. I don't know if it was me or the production, but we couldn't quite pull it off. But that's what I aspired to, is his just the way in which he uses the camera to just pull you into the genre that you're in, to add to the feeling and the fun of wherever you are.
So how did the deal with Apex, how was that arrived at?
I don't know. I think that was the fire sale after the bank took it over.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, it actually got a pretty big video release, right? What kind of treatment did they give it?
No, it did great because it had that fantastic lenticular 3D. It had this great video box, which I credit so much of people actually getting to see this little movie with this fantastic box that where this was at the height of direct-to-video movies and blockbusters and all of that. And it was the perfect time. There was I don't know who it, there was a marketing guy who said, this is what we're going to do, and slapped that box on it, and it just, that snowman that followed you around when you walked around, and it was great, and that made people rent it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I still have my original video of that, and then they did a couple other films with the lenticular covers, and it's too bad that the current DVD release of it, from Scimitar, I don't know if you have, I'm sure you have this, but it's just the image of sort of the evil Jack. It's not lenticular or anything like that, which is too bad, because I think you're right. That really did a lot for the film.
Oh, it did. It did. And it said, it started off by telling the viewer, this is different.
Right.
It might not be your tastes, but it's a little different.
Right. Were there any theatrical showings of the film?
No. I think we screened it for cast and crew. I think we did. We might know that. I mean, but not. I don't. No, I don't. But that was just a very small sort of work print. I have actually in my garage. I have what I believe is the only existing celluloid film. I hope my garage is still there and not in flames, because you hear horror stories about that. But
yeah.
But it's there. I don't know how well I've kept it. I've got these two great big blue canisters that and at some point, people say at some point you've got to just rent out a theater and put it on for all your friends, which I will do at some point.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
It would be fun. It would be fun to do that, yeah.
When it came out, what do you remember about how critics and the public responded to the film?
I remember about a year after it came out. I was very, very thrilled it came out, and then I had no idea. I wasn't really following video blogs at the time of how well it had done and that. But and there wasn't really the internet back in.
Yeah.
I wasn't sort of looking things up and finding things out. So I really didn't know much about it. But about 2 years later, I was in North Carolina, and I was on a raft. I was going on a raft down a whitewater rafting, and there was these very cool young college dudes, and the topic came up of, what did I do? I'm told I'm a writer. What have I done? I thought I wrote Jack Frost, and they went, "Oh my God!" And that was my first sort of indication that it had in some way become this stoner cult. You have to see this crazy movie in the college. That it had a following. That it had found its audience. That people were watching it and getting enormous enjoyment out of it. And I remember just being up in this mountain in North Carolina, thinking this is the coolest thing ever. That this movie that I made, and it was like he was meeting, I don't know, Scorsese. This kid, and he was so impressed by that, and I loved that. I loved that it had found its audience. That's all you hope, is that when you make one of these things, is that the right people see it, because what I write is not completely commercial, and it has to be seen by the right person. So it's a joy when it is.
And then 3 years later came Jack Frost 2. That
yes.
a film that kind of almost trumps the original in some of its goofy aspects and things. How did that come about, and what was that production like?
Then Apex. By that time we knew, and this is it's almost too aware, I think, that the second movie it went out to make itself, which is almost impossible to do. It went, okay, I'm going to be a clever cult with all these little references in it, and I'm going to be funny. And it's in that way, I think that there was this sort of this pressure for what there can be, pressure on a very small production like that. But it was a different experience, and by that time we then had money people leaning on us saying it has to be just that way. So there wasn't the freedom that we had on the first one. It was still a great experience, but not as uniquely special as making that first one, where there was definitely a feeling that everyone was in the trenches trying to make this little movie. And from whatever hit us, from the no snow and whatever it was, that everyone worked so hard that it was more than a job, that was what we seemed to have throughout that production.
Yeah. Well, you got your digital effects on the second one. A lot of that was CGI.
Yes, and I think it's terrible. I think it's in a way it might work because my favorite sequences are the baby snowballs going crazy, and all of that. That I think that part of the movie really got back to what we were doing on the original Jack Frost. The snowman himself was almost too improved, and now that we had a snowman that you could see and he could walk and talk, so I showed him walking and talking, and I think it just gives the game away, where in the first one we couldn't show him walking and talking, so there was a lot of off-camera, a lot of behind the shoulder,
right,
a lot of close-ups on a moving mouth, which I think gave it its personality. And I think, and there's also something, we struggled with the digital. I think it looks like it's shot on some handy cam. We were told it came from up above. Shoot it on video. It's the way to go. That's what everyone's doing. And indeed, everyone's doing it. But everybody had tens of millions of dollars to make it look wonderful. And we struggled with that video. And I think what it does is that at times, again, because I looked at the snowman, and wow, the snowman looks so much better this time, we can show it, and now you've got this very clear digital and a wider shot of the snowman. Some of it looks like behind-the-scenes footage because you can see so much of it. We're just letting too much out of the bag. Yet when you come to the baby snowballs that are so small that you have to get in close and tight, and it throws the background out of focus, that you got much more of the flavor of the first movie.
And what was the reception like for the second one?
I don't think it is loved. I think that feeling comes through. I think that it is not as people who love the first one, they get the second one, but I don't think there is, and I've used the word before, charm. I don't think it's there in that second one.
Gotcha.
I think there is a dryness to it. That first one, there was a little spark for whatever reason. The fact that you and I are talking about it nearly 20 years later, a silly snowman movie.
Yeah.
That I'm not saying, ooh, me, it's magical, but there's a little bit of film magic in that. For the low budget silly movie that it is, that I think you can tell that first one was made with love and care and a great deal of fun.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. Is there a script for Jack Frost 3, and would you be interested in revisiting the characters and the story?
I would love to. I would love to, and I started writing it. I think there's 20 pages somewhere written, and it was going to be a giant Jack Frost. Because I think at the end, it happens at the end, right at the end of Jack Frost 2. There's the screaming up at it, Jackzilla.
Yeah.
And this giant carrot drop on the boat.
Yep.
And the second one started off that it started off that there was this storms. I can't remember. I think I wrote it that it was now 10 years later, and I was using the kid. The little boy is now grown up, and it was going to be And what I think, yes, it was going to be set in a city, and I was going to steal some scenes from the very original movie that never got made, setting in a city.
Oh, sure.
Where I wanted Jack Zilla, this giant snowman, to because by the time I'm writing it now, digital effects are coming down in price, and I think you could do it. Is that it was set in a city. Jack Frostzilla attacks this skyscraper, envelops the skyscraper so it's completely frozen, and he's killing people by freezing in and coming in through the vents and all of that.
Oh, I love it.
I'd written the beginning of it. I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to make it, I would adore it. It holds such a special place in my heart.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time tonight, Michael. It's been an absolute blast. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, cool. It's lovely reminiscing.
What a great conversation with Michael. And thank you for your understanding with the audio quality on this archival stuff. This was back in the day, long ago, where I was recording all of these conversations with pretty primitive means. And so when I port them forward onto the show here, I try to dust them off and tidy them up as best I can. But really, it's more about the preservation of the discussion. And I really hope you enjoyed that. Let's dive into the topic for voicemails on this episode, which is what are your favorite physical media releases for 2024? The first thing we're going to present here is my discussion that I had with Anthony C. Ferrante on his picks for the year. Here I go with Anthony. Anthony, so great to have you on. I'm excited to talk through 2024. You and I talk all the time, and inevitably the conversation finds its way down into the realm of what's new and what's like this world of physical media that we have right now, which is kind of amazing. At the same time is challenging. I guess we'd both agree. So thanks for coming on to talk shop here a little bit here at the end of the year.
No, thank you, Justin. It's kind of fun to do this. Haven't done this in a while, so and there's a lot to talk about. I mean, as we've seen this industry, there was this shift, at least on the studio level, toward streaming, and okay, forget about physical media, and then so places like Target and Best Buy basically said, well, yeah, we're not going to carry DVDs or Blu-rays anymore.
Right.
And now the unlikely candidate that's filled in a lot of that gap, other than Barnes and Noble, is Walmart, which is now doing these exclusive steel boxes that are like selling out at Walmart, and they're releasing horror films and things that you can imagine, like in the past would be like, well, wait a minute, we're putting Terrifier on our shelves. Don't we know what that movie is about?
Well, I remember back when Walmart used to mandate edits on everything, right? From cover art to content. Remember those days?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's we didn't, like part of the whole thing was the stickers. Wasn't that a big thing at some point where,
Sure.
the
Parental
advisory and they wouldn't carry certain things, because it was, too horrific or whatever. But
yeah.
It's been interesting. But then what's really happened, as we talk about in any nerd out there that loves physical media, that you have some of these labels like Vinegar Syndrome, TerraVision, Severin, they're out there, Arrow, Umbrella, we can name a whole bunch of them that are just mining the catalog of all of these classic films and treating them and revering them with respect and brand new transfers. And we see Paramount doing that a lot, which is nice, but they're also licensing a lot of the other fringe stuff to these labels, and you're
Right.
getting some great releases that way. And so, and with a lot of the stuff selling out, it's clear that there is a market for physical media. I don't know if it's strictly for nerds, but I think you have a lot of people that go to Walmart. You see they're still selling a lot of DVDs there, because my understanding is, like in the Midwest, DVDs sell well, so they're grabbing, even their small scale of stuff they have, they're grabbing collector market, but they're also still adhering to people that have DVD players, just want to watch DVDs. They can't find stuff on streaming, and that's the problem. Is that with streaming, it's limited. They're saying this is the top 20 things that we think people want to see, but then it's like, well, yeah, well, what about broadcast news? What about this? In order to see that stuff, you need to have a copy of the disc or download it from iTunes or whatever, and then to have it disappear once their license goes away. So Yeah,
Yeah, that
it's
has to be frustrating I mean, that's an interesting thing to bring up as a filmmaker though, because you've done a lot of stuff for streaming over the last, let's say 10 years here, 5 years in particular. And you come from, I mean, we're the same age basically. So we come from a background of you create something, and this is the same bridge I find myself at over and over with writing too. I've never gotten into writing for the net, for like the internet, because it just seems like such an empty endeavor, because at the end of it, it's there, it's relevant for a split second, then it's literally like it's gone, and the world couldn't care less. And for me, even though people aren't really buying print so much anymore, not nearly as much as they used to, magazines and all that, for me, it feels like I'm doing something that actually has a place to live when I'm doing it in that, writing for one of the horror magazines or TV Guide or whatever. As a filmmaker, though, creating stuff for these streaming platforms, and you've done for a number of them, including Tubi, what's the experience like for you coming at that with your mindset of I create things, then I have a disc I can hold and have?
I mean, occasionally some of these things will get some physical release somewhere. And there's always in the back of my mind a thing of, hey, is a possibility that, we can try to do a physical release. But yeah, you do get worried that at a certain point the stuff will just kind of disappear into the ether because, it's streaming. But the thing is, it's content, and content's going to exist for a while. And as long as the companies I work for are in existence, the stuff will have some life.
Yeah.
But is there a part of me like, yeah, at some point, maybe I should be lobbying to get some kind of physical release on this stuff, but it needs to warrant it at that point, and maybe time will show the value of having some of these things go out into the world. I mean, certainly, who would have thought a lot of the '90s movies that went straight to VHS and stuff would get deluxe treatment? I love Ticks that Brian Usna produced, and that finally got a release.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that think about all the stuff that Sci-Fi Channel, which I did a lot of films for, where for what probably close to 10 plus years, maybe more, they probably produced 40 different movies with all these different companies, and it was like an anthology show every weekend.
Yeah.
Different things. Here's fantasy, here's sci-fi, here's horror, and there was a lot of really cool movies that they put out that I think that's going to suddenly see sort of a circling back on, where like, oh, hey, look, we should put this out on Blu-ray or 4K, because a lot of that stuff is shot on film.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the
that
equivalent as the direct-to-video stuff from years ago, which is now seeing a huge resurgence. Like you mentioned a few labels, Vinegar, TerraVision, some of the smaller labels like that are completely embracing the direct-to-video stuff. That was just quickies for the shelf back in the day in so many cases. So maybe maybe those sci-fi originals are sort of the future wave of that kind of retro nostalgia releasing.
I hope so, because I think that, like I said, I know there was a lot of really interesting stuff that was going on then, and also I did my second film was Headless Horseman with Ken Badish, and um, we actually did two versions of that movie. We did a version that was for sci-fi, and then we did a version that was for foreign. And I'm not sure if that one was the one that ended up on the DVDs. It might have been, but we had to adjust the credits because they took sci-fi off the credits, and sci-fi demanded the credits for their airing.
Hmm.
So in that, there's that version. I think that, we restored a longer version of the credits. And then I think there's a couple language things. I don't think they didn't have any problem with the gore or anything. So the gore remained, sci-fi had their list of mandates at the time of, the things you couldn't do. And so a certain language, and, if it was monster on person violence, it was okay. But if it was person on person violence, you couldn't show a lot of gore. So a headless horseman or a mosquito could go and rip someone limb to limb, but if it was a guy or a woman doing it, then no, we can't show that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So there was a lot of stuff they got away with those movies.
That's interesting.
And so I'm curious if there are alternate versions of those. for some of the other, things that Active and Ken did, and maybe some of the other companies, because
Right.
yeah, but the it does the film exist? Because that's a lot of that stuff up until probably, I would assume, 2010 or something, when things started shifting to digital with Red and everything. A lot of stuff was shot on film, so there's actual film
Right.
elements out there for some of that stuff, even though it was edited to tape.
Hmm. Well, it's a crazy time, and I know that you follow this stuff closely. You keep an eye on you. I know you do subscribe. Like we're going to talk a little bit about soundtrack releases too, and I know you're a huge collector in that realm as well as with the video stuff. And so right now, looking at your perspective on things, where do you think how does the market look to you today in 2024?
I think that I think you're seeing the digging up of things that we would never have seen before,
Yeah.
because of elements not being available, and people will be like, okay, VHS version of this is okay. A few years ago, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I think I've been talking with you about this
Yep.
forever. I said there is a long cut of the John Hughes film that exists, that there's rumor to exist, that and Paramount should do something. And finally, when they did the 4K, the only, I think, surviving element was some kind of VHS tape in John Hughes's archives of the longer cut, but they put that out as a special feature, and that was like, that's a huge thing. And
Yeah.
so suddenly you go, wow, okay, people will pay, the 15th time to buy that movie because there's something special and new on it. And I think there's these white whale releases too. Something that even though I haven't seen yet because it hasn't come out, but it will be out before the end of the year. Is that the Michael Mann has refused to let The Keep, his
Yep.
1982 horror film, ever be released on physical media here in the States, other than the VHS and Laserdisc. And then I think overseas, Australia was able to do a DVD release. So it was figured that I think at some point, Kino Lorber actually we were going to try to do that, but they were stopped. And then out of thin air, Vinegar Syndrome, for their Black Friday, announced that as their secret title of The Keep, and it sold out within, like, I think less than 36 hours,
Yeah, it
like
was wild.
12,000 copies.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not the cut that I think he wanted to go and do a director's cut, which would have probably required way more money than necessary. But it shows that there is a rabid fan base for this stuff. I mean, 12,000 copies isn't a lot to go, oh, that's not enough. Like, I mean, what, they were selling it for 50, $60 or whatever, with a booklet and all this extra special stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's that. I think that gives us hope that we might start seeing some even more obscure stuff. I think James L. Brooks did the Sony, his film, I think I'll Do Anything, which started life out as a musical with songs by Prince, and then they got cold feet like a month before the release and pulled all the songs out.
Hmm.
That version would be amazing to see.
Yeah.
That
Totally.
that's something that should be resurrected. So I think that for I think there's still a lot to be mined, like we said. I mean, even if we start, forget about the legacy releases over and over again and stuff, there's still a lot of interesting movies that are seeing the light of day. And again, kudos to Paramount for, they're spearheading their own 4K stuff for the stuff they know is a sure thing, but they're willing to license out a lot of their fringe stuff to these other labels that are just making bank and showcasing things that we would never get a chance to see. And then by that same token, because I love soundtracks and stuff like that, you're seeing a lot of people releasing, like, Terror's doing a lot of vinyl, but they're also doing cassettes of things like cassette soundtracks of My Bloody Valentine and
Yeah.
Friday the 13th and stuff like that. And so, yeah, so it's interesting. So there's a lot of things that you may get the rights to do this one thing, like, but I don't think Terror can do a vinyl for Friday the 13th, but they can do the cassette. And so you get a lot of these actual special things that I think have a nice collectible thing for fans like us, that we would have loved when we saw these movies originally.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And the soundtrack thing has come so far. And TerraVision's always specialized in the more obscure soundtrack stuff in that realm. And I've always really applauded them for that because we were, for a long time, the more niche kinds of films and especially deep into genre and subgenre fringe and all that, you just didn't get much of anything in that realm. And there have been a number of labels that have come up over the last 10, 15 years here that are really catering to that audience. And I think it's just amazing. And I think it's a similar thing with the film because a lot of studios might not see much. I think the change in the physical media thing, like you were talking about in the beginning here, Walmart still is the number one retailer in the US. They have been for a long time, frankly. But the willingness for them to take on steel books and new box sets. I just did a big Bewitched box set that's coming out. I think it's in January. And I think that's going to have an exclusive edition at Walmart. But I think that the changing market has also helped with studio openness to licensing stuff because historically they might hold things kind of precious and not want to dish that out to someone like a Shout or TerraVision or whoever else it might be. But now, as studios are becoming less focused on physical, some of them stepping away altogether, I think that they're thinking, how can we continue to make money off this outside of just streaming,
Well,
platforms and
you
things like that?
well, you think that the Disney, which now owns Fox, and Disney also had their sub theatrical labels for a time for non kids fair, like Hollywood
Right.
Pictures and Touchstone. You think that, oh well, they should start licensing this stuff out. I mean, they saw success this year when they finally remastered Aliens and The Abyss and True Lies, and those sold out instantly. And it
Mm-hmm.
took like 2 months to restock on Amazon, and those were highly sought after, and they made a lot of money. So there's a lot of stuff like that, a lot of fringe stuff that they would be caught dead putting out, but they might want to reconsider, opening up the archives, especially the Fox stuff, to get licensed again because
Yeah.
they started throttling that stuff, even to the point of, I think I read something where at least some of the Fox stuff with theatrical releases and stuff too, re-releases, the archive theaters are not allowing things to be reshown for some reason. So
Hmm.
it's like they got money sitting there. If you want to complain about not making money, there's money on the table for them if they
Yeah.
want to get back in that game. And I hope they do because, like I said, there's just stuff that's just sitting around that I'd love to see. Get another day in the sun.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that Lionsgate is that's the white whale in this realm in terms of licensing because the sheer volume of titles that they have over at Lionsgate that they're just keeping behind lock and key is incredible. And they've done some really solid releases historically. They're not a company that has not done video well because they certainly have done home video well. And even on titles that don't do well in theaters, they still give them pretty expansive physical media releases historically. But they're not keen on licensing to anyone yet, it seems, and or very few and far between. And I just think that's going to be an exciting day when someone cracks that code. That's going to be a good one. Like so much of that Disney stuff you're talking about that's just sort of sitting in archive. I would love for someone to get into Lionsgate with permission to do something fun.
Yeah, and they have with some of their restaurant and I think they some of the MVD titles, maybe, is that part of them?
It,
I
MVDs, well, I mean, they might distribute through MVD, but I
oh,
mean, the Vestron thing for sure, and that's been their sort of olive branch to the fans is the Vestron series, which is cool, which are great releases, but they're just not that many, and there's so much more that they could be doing with it if they really wanted to.
I mean, I was happy, thrilled last year when they put out Dennis One and Dennis Two, which were the two first big things I worked on as an
Oh,
effects supervisor when I
yeah,
came to LA. So like, we did some sit down interviews. I got them access to some other things, and it was kind of nice. They actually, did a nice package on Blu-ray because that thing hadn't been out domestically since the DVD days.
right. That's
Um,
awesome.
so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. But I guess we should probably dig into our
Yeah, let's talk about this
some of our
year.
favorite stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I would love to hear what, because I know you've put together a bit of a list here to talk through, and I'm really excited to hear about what's on that list because it has been one hell of a year. For all the pluses and minuses we've been covering here, when you zoom out in the month of December and look back at the sheer volume of what's hit the shelves this last year, it's mind-boggling. So I would love to hear what you've got here, Tone or Anthony.
Well, I think we'll kind of start on the music side of things, and some kudos to some of the labels. We were talking about Terror Vision. I got to say that they did a bang up job with Return of the Living Dead Part Two soundtrack. It was a score for that they did, and they did some nice box sets. With you can get these like the old kind of glasses you could get at with painted things on it, and then they had the posters and they had the cassette. But the score by J. Peter Robinson was fantastic, and I had never really listened to the score outside of on the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So to actually have the soundtrack, and I didn't really think twice about it because I'd forgotten because I haven't seen that movie in a long time. But the trioxin theme that was in the original movie is actually reprised on the on the part two soundtrack, which da 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 da,
Mm-hmm.
that little riff and everything. So that
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
yeah,
Yep.
so the fact that that's on there, a newer version that for the second movie specifically, it's like, oh, this is cool. They kept that as its sort of ongoing theme. But it's a beautiful set. Really, they went all out on that, and I think that's one of my favorites from them. And then of course, I love their cassettes. Like
Mm-hmm.
they did Friday 13th Part 5, New Beginning cassette soundtrack, and I think they're just kind of slowly going through all the movies right now. So that for them, and then and also just talking about how cool they are. They have a lot of really amazing Blu-rays that they put out, and Dante's Inferno they kind of put out earlier this
Right.
year. I think it
Yeah.
was that old black and white silent film, and
I did some work on that release. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they just rolled out the red carpet on that. So definitely, people should check them out. Another soundtrack label that I adore is Waxwork Records,
Yep.
and I think they found like a really great balance. They've done they keep doing a lot of things correct in how to survive, but they have license to do a lot of stuff through Warner Brothers and uh, some of the Mike Flanagan stuff. So you're getting like you get Barbie and you get some of the bigger titles for Waxwork that kind of is their bread and butter, I think, the Godzilla movies and all that. And then they turn around and they dig up some really really cool stuff. I mean, in the new year, which hasn't come out yet, but they got I guess the master tapes from Phantasm, and they're doing a
Mm-hmm.
3 album
Saw
release
that.
of the original stuff, and they dig into the obvious things like Night of the Living Dead and Carrie, and those kind of things. They did this great thing last year was Dawn of the Dead, which is all the source cues, or
Mm-hmm.
the
Interstitial
yes,
stuff.
yeah, interstitial things. So, but one of the coolest releases for me for them this year was they finally released on vinyl the Exorcist 3 soundtrack.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that was just like that is so cool that they got that, and I love that movie. And Barry DeVorson did a great score for that.
Yeah,
So I'm glad.
Waxwork has kind of become like the first stop for a lot of contemporary stuff too. Like I know that they're doing
Yeah.
the Nosferatu score that's going to be
Yeah, that's
coming
sold
out
out.
soon, and yeah.
Oh, and the other thing they did right is they just, because they were having so much delay in uh, getting the releases from other vendors for vinyl production, they basically they now do a lot of the pressing. I think they do almost all the pressings in house. So they're in control of it and have a better idea of when this stuff can be released. So I mean that's for a company like them, I think that's just like that's a boon, and I think you might start seeing a little bit more of that as if vinyl and everything continues to go the way it's going.
Hmm.
because you get the color. The other thing too is the other thing that makes it cool is the different colors, the color variants and everything. It's
Absolutely.
just, I mean, yeah, I like black vinyl, it's fine, but if suddenly like there's a really cool orange and yellow thing or something that just really emulates what the movie encapsulates what the movie is, it's like, yeah, you want that.
Oh yeah, they're killer.
And
The Waxwork Killer Clowns had like a cotton candy color on one and then kind of a ice cream swirl on the other. And on that Return of the Living Dead 2 you were talking about, that's such a great release from TerraVision. And they do those in limited numbers. I think it's like 1,000 on
yeah.
that, but they same thing. That's but what they do is to offer people options. They'll have a retail color on the vinyl, and then they'll have a club color. So if you're a club member, you get your own special, much more limited look to how the discs are made. And Waxwork has a really cool Instagram page where they show the process of creating those and pressing them.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things that you can just watch endlessly because it's such a precise and yet sort of very improvised process. It seems like just sort of roll the vinyl in the colors and then put it in this press and you watch it come down and it trims the edge off so perfectly. It's mesmerizing to watch.
Another labeled Death Waltz. Just they had a box set of all the Nightmare on Elm Street vinyl a few
Hmm.
years back, but now they're it looks like they're individually releasing them. So they just released Elm Street and Elm Street 2, and then Dream Warriors 3. And I'd forgotten because I then started doing a deep dive. I forgot how like there was never really a consistent composer for the Elm Street movies. Like Angelo
No.
Badalamenti did the score for number three, and it's kind of interesting about those movies. So I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing if they continue to roll out the rest of the stuff from that set. And then
Yeah.
the other in terms of vinyl, the other place who has like a market on the Carpenter stuff is Sacred Bones,
Oh, of course.
and they just did a really beautiful set of the anthology, tracks from one and two.
Hmm.
And the Carpenter's new release, the Noir, I think it was the Lost Themes number
Noir.
4 or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
Yeah. So and the fans buy this stuff. They're 100% into certain people, and I'm it's who would have figured like Carpenter being like the god of the 70s and 80s and early 90s, with all these films that he did, and now is like a god with the music. Like he's become a music folk hero, with his releases. I mean, his other stuff, his films are always going to be evergreen. They're always going to do well. But the fact that, he's etched out, new music that he's doing, and then also his legacy stuff that he's re-recording, it's really cool to kind of see that happen with him
Oh,
because
it's so cool. I remember back in, I think it was 2016, somewhere around there, when he did his, I guess maybe it was his only tour, but he came through Chicago on that tour. And I never thought that I'd be showing up for John Carpenter, the rock star. It was so amazing to see him take the stage. And there's that bashful side to him that doesn't like public attention so much. But then there's also the part of him that's like, damn it, I wish that they would have figured this out earlier. And you can kind of see and hear that in so many interviews. When he walks out on stage, puts his arms up in the air like a hero, like
yeah,
and the place just erupts. It was completely sold out, standing room only all around. And everyone was dialed in from front to back. And he's up there doing his kind of grandpa shuffle as he's playing with some clips and great video montage stuff playing behind him. But it was incredible because he is the example I always point to. And you and I talk about him all the time. It's so great that he's here to see all this. I think it's
yeah.
amazing that he has been present and part of many of these re-release video and then soundtrack things and on to his new score work and releases. It's just amazing and it's so rare because we're terrible at doing this while people are alive. We're really good at it after they die. And so I'm glad that he's been around to see this whole thing.
I actually had I can trump your Chicago visit. I didn't know he was coming in town, and I was listening to the radio, and I think it was K Rock or something, or not K Rock. It was one of those stations in LA, and he was being interviewed, and they were giving away tickets for that show,
Oh,
And it's like what is it's everybody knows Michael Myers, but the question was, but what is he also, what was he known as in the original Halloween? And
Oh
I knew it
boy.
was the Shape. So I called in and I got the tickets. And the coolest part was it was for Halloween night. So
Oh,
and so I had met a producer who actually has an office out of that house in Halloween. The I think it was the Strode House. No, not Strode House. It was the uh
you're talking about the Myers house, Michael Doherty?
no, not Miles. Myers. I think it's the Doyle House. Not the
Okay.
Doyle. It's one of them. There's one across the street, the Doyle, and then the one that
The
Annie.
Doyle and Wallace houses are the ones
Well,
that
there's
are.
The Wallace House. Yeah. So I had a meeting there that Halloween night. Kids were coming by, and then I went right after that to go to see Carpenter perform
Oh,
down the street.
crazy.
So it
That's
was like
great.
that was kind of it was kind of like, oh, okay, this is I'm so glad I got to see this, and to do it on Halloween night was just
That's amazing. That's like when I got I think it was 2013, I want to say. Yeah, I think 2013 or maybe 2014, early 14. But anyway, do you remember back when I was trying to convince South Pasadena to make Halloween into John Carpenter night and
yeah.
finally got it to happen? Like finally got it signed in and the city did this whole big proclamation ceremony and stuff. It was right before Halloween, naming October 31st John Carpenter night. John showed up, which was a bit of a task because he was really reluctant to go, but anyway, thank God for Sandy because she kind of prodded him to show up for it. But then a couple nights later, we had a screening of Halloween at the city building, and it's in the park right there, like right across from Lori's house, across from the junior high, which is the library, the junior high from Rob's Rob Zombie's Halloween. You're like in Haddonfield screening Halloween right after this proclamation had been made. And I had my friend Lito Valesco, who I always hired to do Michael at any kind of Halloween related event. He was always my main guy. And I had Lito come and he was in full regalia and just, he plays the part so well. And after the screening, he and I just wandered around town, Michael Myers in Haddonfield, walking around, going over by the Myers house, getting his pictures with people. It was a total trip. That was a surreal experience. I mean, front to back, it was a surreal experience. But then to have it capped by that Halloween experience there in South Pasadena was unforgettable. That's just awesome. What a great story about you winning the ticket. That's awesome.
The last thing, which I'm going to diverge from horror stuff, but again, talking about just digging into the archives, um, Tom Petty, who I'm a big fan of, they've been the state of this family have been digging into everything that he's done and putting out these really, really great sets of stuff. And you know, he wrote a lot of great music, which we all know about. But like Prince, he wrote a lot of stuff that just kind of disappeared. They recorded it, and no one knew about it. And there's still songs out there. You know, usually once you kind of get dripped down to the, because they did an anthology of, other stuff that was a combination of old and new that was like, oh, wow, these are great songs. Going, okay, well, that's it for Tom Petty. And so they went and did a 2 disc set reissue of his Long After Dark album, which you know I've always loved, and it has Change of Heart, but also You Got Lucky on it. But it's never been perceived as like, oh, this is Damn the Tornadoes, this is Full Moon Fever, this is Wildflowers,
Hmm.
and but I just always like that album. It has, there's not a bad song on the album. So they just did a deluxe edition where they had the remastered the original disc, but then put a disc of 12 unreleased songs. Some of them are from different sessions that have appeared on other things, but on there were like there's like 3 or 4 songs that no one's ever heard of, never heard before his version. So there was
Hmm.
a song on there called "Don't Make Me Walk the Line," which is so different in a way because it was very, very polished and very, very power poppy for them, but it's a great song. And then there's another song on there called "Never Be You," which in the Streets of Fire, Marie McKee sings "Never Be You," which he wrote and that she performed, but his version never was released. And so it's really great to hear his version of the song, and
Wow.
it's just as good as anything out there. And then the other weird one that they uncovered was this. he did a cover of Wild Thing, and I guess they were in the studio and just messing around, and they thought it sounded good, so they went in and did a full polished version of Wild Thing. Let's just it's not just like live. Let's just go and record it and then put it out. It was like they thought they were going to do a single with it or something, so they just put all this effort into it. And I guess there was also some French TV sessions that they did where they were doing that. So there's some variations on some of the songs they did for that. But yeah, it's again, that's again good digging into things and finding the stuff, and people are still interested in it. I think the vinyl sold out right away. So
That's amazing. Yeah, they've been doing that with Elvis for years. They find alternate cuts of songs and things like that from
except okay, except with Elvis, I'm going to stop you there. Except for Elvis, like it's still stuff that we know that he did, not stuff that you didn't know he did. But go ahead. I think
yeah,
they've exhausted enough of that.
yeah, it's pretty rare to find things that are unknown. The Doors, the same thing. There are still a few tracks that come out once in a while on some compilation or whatever where they have unearthed a song that no one has ever heard from them before. And it's super exciting when they do that. But yeah, you're exactly right. And a lot of those Elvis releases too, frankly, are a bunch of aborted takes. So you'll see like 20 takes of a song on these things. It'll be like an 8 disc set, and it's just take after take where things went wrong or whatever happened. So it's hit or miss for sure. But I love when things like this, when people, a label, whoever it might be, people can see it as a cash grab or whatever you want to see it as. But really, it does a great service to fans. And it's the same thing in the realm, like you're talking about these different record labels. It's the same thing with these distribution companies that are out there. They don't have to do any of this. And they're choosing to invest in it. Even if it doesn't show up with a boatload of extras, you're still getting a new transfer. You're usually getting some kind of new audio mix or at least a cleanup on either of those. And so for them to invest in these things, many of which, like we've discussed earlier already, are things that we never thought would see the light of day on, like a deluxe or collector's edition release, is really outstanding. So we've talked a lot about music here. Let's get into the video side.
I've got one other label to mention
All
real
right.
quick briefly. Enjoy the Ride has got some deal with Paramount, and they just put out, which never been on vinyl before, the score for 48 Hours,
Oh, wow.
and it's a great James Horner score. They also did Top Gun and I think Days of Heaven, which they had the soundtrack album, which is songs, but they've never done the score. So another label that should get some props for people to take a look at is Enjoy the Ride Records. They also did Star Trek: The Motion Picture last year. So, but let's go into Blu-ray and DVD. You there?
Still there. Sorry, I
Yeah.
don't know that. Go ahead.
No. So let's jump into movies.
Yeah, yeah. So let's hit me up here. What's the first thing you got on your list for 2024?
I think hands down, like the coolest release is what they did. They did that box set for The Hitcher. Like they
Mm,
remastered The Hitcher, and I hadn't watched The Hitcher in years, and I
yeah,
forgot a lot about that movie. And you're just watching, going, "Oh my God, this is it's so well made. It's stylish, it's dark. I mean, I can't imagine anybody making this movie today.
right.
Like, especially, what happens with Jennifer Jason Leigh toward the end of
Right.
the movie.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of weird stuff, but again, resurrecting that movie, I think the Studio Canal took that movie and spent a while. I think it was announced a year and a half ago or something. It took them this
Yeah.
long just to get it.
Second Sight did a region free big set
That's it.
too.
That was it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Second Sight. It's incredible. It's an incredible release. So I think that's just it's one of those things that you never like the Keep would never see happen.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they did that, and they do these great booklets and all these extra things to make it collectible, so the collectors can get it, and then later the non-collectors can get the bare bones version.
Right. When I was working on body parts with Eric Red years ago, he was so like, man, I wish that someone could crack the code on the Hitcher. Why is this not happening? It was so frustrating for him. And as a filmmaker, that would be so frustrating when people come to you all the time saying, why is this not out there? And I'm thrilled that it finally is. And this is a great combination on this package. Not only the physical state of it, it's in one of those great boxes So the box that can sit on your shelf looks like a work of art. Umbrella is mastering that as well. But the book in there is no small book. It's like a full-fledged book. We have historians pitching in on stuff, both in print and in commentaries on this. Everybody that they could get their hands on, it seems, they brought in for the special features. And I apologize. I don't know who produced the special features on this, but kudos to them because this is a real home run. What a great release.
Uh, and let's see, next on the list. Uh, Again, haven't got to see it yet. But the Synapse put out Trick or Treat with those
Yeah.
gigantic, those box sets that sold out immediately. With the soundtrack on there in a CD form, and just again, like when you think these movies came out and were just perceived as like throwaway, uh, thrill horror movies, as this for a niche audience, and then they're selling out in a week or whatever, how long it took for them to sell those things out. And that's another one of those things of like care put into movies that would normally not see the light of day.
Yeah. And you said Synapse on that. Do you mean Arrow?
No, I think Trick or Treat. I think that was
Oh,
Synapse. I'm
trick.
almost.
Oh, you're talking the Trick or Treat because Trick or Treat also got a 4K
Yeah.
release through Arrow. But yeah, Trick or Treat, and that was actually through Michael Felsher and Red Shirt Pictures. He's the one
Yes.
who did that whole thing in conjunction with them. And yeah, that was one on everyone's list for so
Yeah.
many years. That movie sat there, and I don't have that new release either yet. But man, does it look great! And
Well,
I
yeah, I
just
missed
wonder
out on it.
if it was a
So
music issue or what the deal was that kept it relegated to the backwaters for so damn long. But as soon as they announced that, that's another one, like you mentioned, these soundtracks that just sell out like bang. It was the same thing. The day that landed, I was out in New Jersey at a convention and everybody was buzzing about it. Everybody was. And I think it was sold out by the end of the day.
no, I think it took a little because they had three different covers, but yeah, one of them sold out, and then it took about a week, and it was all gone. So and
Crazy.
then they're going to do a sort of just a bare bones version later, but
Right.
yeah. Um,
Damn good
another
one.
through Arrow, another one of those movies that didn't know would ever kind of see the light of day in a nice version is the Walter Hill's The Warriors.
Yeah.
They did a great box set of that. And in addition to, I believe, like what happened. The thing about the Warriors is kind of frustrating, which Hill went in and did a director's cut supposed version and added all these animated interstitials and stuff to it, and that
Yeah,
sort
it's
of became the
terrible.
de facto version of the Warriors. And so the original wasn't really getting a release,
Yeah.
and so they finally did this set that put the original version, but it's also 4K remaster of both versions. So you get the
Mm-hmm.
theatrical cut and the 2005 version of the movie.
That's how it should be done.
So that was wonderful to see the film because yeah, it's okay when directors go in. We all have done it at some point, but that movie, the original cut, there's nothing wrong with it, and it is revered as um, a movie that uh, anybody that saw it just you can't forget it.
Yeah. It's the
So
same thing with Blade Runner and bless Ridley Scott because he always understood that. Whenever there was a
yeah,
new release of his new version of it, he made sure to include all the previous releases and that incredible documentary, Dangerous Days. I mean, all of that comes no matter which iteration you're purchasing. And because everybody puts their toe in the stream at some point, right? And some version is someone's first trip there. It makes sense to always include those and not go the Star Wars route where we just pretend this stuff doesn't exist anymore.
I want to give kudos to Severin as well. That they've done a lot of stuff that's been great. Especially a lot of the Italian movies they've been going in and doing 4K on. But
Right.
again, I'm prefacing that these are great sets. I have not some of them I have not get to see yet. But they all the haunts
Oh,
folk
that set is
horror.
amazing.
They just did a volume two. Like the first set had Eyes of Fire, which again was another one of those obscure titles that
Right.
from that you'd love to see again and now is out, and So the fact that they can find all these interesting movies and put them and collect, like if you had them separately, they might not do well, but if you put them all on a set, you're now introducing people to stuff that they would have never been aware of and in a nice theme.
Yeah, that All
So,
the
so
Haunts box that was my favorite release. I think that was last year. And it is another masterstroke. The booklet in it is just as incredible as the presentation of all the documentary elements that are built into those discs. What a great compilation, a thorough presentation of a subgenre, which is something that we're seeing a lot more of now too. You're seeing film noir box sets. You're seeing stuff like this, and yeah, I really applaud them because that was really going on a limb. I think that's not an obvious home run for home audiences. Most of those films people don't know. So they're
yeah.
banking on the quality of the people who are involved and in Severin's taste in releasing that stuff. And I really, really applaud them for that and for continuing with a second one. Amazing.
And let's see, we'll jump over to Shout. I hope that these are the end all be all releases, but they did Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and these great you know multi-box things, with all
Right.
these different extra stuff. Because the movies never they just haven't looked as good on home entertainment in a long time, but they keep re-releasing them.
Right.
So I'm hoping these 4K remasters, which again, I want to say I'm excited for them. I haven't got them and I haven't watched them, but I think that just that's something where taking it away from Sony and them taking the lead on it. I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah. And they've done a great job of continuing the John Carpenter thing too, and also rolling in some of that Sacred Bones stuff with his releases. But they're also getting out into the tchotchke game with Silent Night, Deadly Night 4K, for example, that comes with the novelization. That's a new thing for them to be approaching it that way. And I think that's exciting that they're continuing to explore alternate editions and add-ons that add that value. But the Labyrinth, man, that came with I think a snow globe and stuff.
Yeah.
That was just a wildly thorough set. And same thing with Krampus, the 4K Krampus that I think has already landed this year came with another snow globe of the house and a little stuffy gingerbread guy and some other fun things. So yeah, there's some of
and then
this.
and they dipped into the soundtrack game as well independently. With they put out the soundtrack for Humanoids from the Deep and Battle Beyond the Stars, which were
Yeah,
James Horner scores.
right.
I don't think they've sold as well as because no one really knows Shout for vinyl, and they're kind of buried somewhere on their site.
Hmm.
But that's because they own, I think, the Corman Library. Putting that out is just it's I think it's another one of those things that they kind of crack that code.
Yeah,
Maybe they need to pair with somebody else to kind of get the word out. But yeah, I'm glad that they're doing things like that.
yeah.
So, let's see, what else do we got here? And then I've got like three other things that I will go to Vinegar, which again is one of my favorites. They have a bunch of sub labels and stuff, and
Yep.
they have a new sub label called Cinematograph, I think is the name of it, and they did the impossible. They managed to get Little Darlings, a 1980 movie, out
Right.
on 4K. I think it's 4K, because it was always a song rights issue. So a lot of stuff was replaced when it was because at the time a lot of these movies they didn't have the rights because they didn't know about physical media. So it would just say for VHS release only. And so then when they had to go do a DVD or something, they'd have to swap out the music and stuff. So there
Right.
wasn't contracts for it. So it was just pricey. But they finally were able to resolve that with that. And then also another one I think they're putting out this month, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which was another one that was just buried in rights issues hell. So with success with a lot of the movies that Vinegar does, which is a mixture of, independent stuff, but also now studio stuff. They're getting the money to be able to go and go, look, we'll do this. We'll take care of it. We'll give you a new master that you can put on streaming, but we'll put out the physical media.
Right.
And now rescuing stuff like that. So really happy that they did that. And then they did this beautiful set. I guess we're going on Walter Hill kick this time, but Southern Comfort they did earlier this year, just an amazing 4K set, and
Yeah.
not one of his better known movies, but just a great action kind of quasi deliverance type movie that I think people should see. And people that like these labels, they'll pitch in and go, hey, I've heard about that, I'll check it out. And
Right.
it introduces people, that may not have been interested in it before into, grabbing it and going, oh, I'm going to check out all Walter Hill stuff.
Yeah, they've really
Um,
expanded their horizons in terms of getting into mainstream films, and in addition to all the great cult stuff that they do and fringe things that all their partner labels especially specialize in. And I've been really impressed with how they continue to grow. And they're an interesting Vinegar is interesting in the sense that people are dedicated to the brand. That's the ultimate trust. It's kind of like that the person at the video store that you used to be able to trust if you'd go in and say, "Hey, I'm at a loss here. What should I rent tonight?" And you know that one person would be able to give you something that is totally in tune with what you're looking for, and you go home and you can trust that you're going to enjoy what you're getting. And I think that's at the heart of why their subscription service continues to really, I mean, it sets the bar for anyone else who's trying to do video subscription on this in this realm, because people just trust in what Vinegar is doing. And I think that it's also allows people to explore in the way that we used to blind rent, because I didn't know most of what I was renting when I was a kid. I didn't have access to insider magazines or anything like that. And so I would very much rent off of the cover, rent off of the promises made on the back cover. And if I would have gone in there with too many filters in place, too many blinders on, I wouldn't know 90% of what I love now. And I think that Vinegar is a label that offers some of that. And especially when you can dip in during their sales that they have, like the Black Friday sale is always really, really stout. You can get a lot of stuff that you might not have otherwise taken the dive on, blind rent slash blind buy in a way, and get to experience something that you might not have given the chance otherwise. I think that's a great approach to how they do this.
I used to have that at a record store in my hometown, Rock Bottom Records. Dan Reed is still a friend of mine, and he was, he would. I come in and because I have a huge, I love music in general, and you go, well, you should try this group, and if you don't like it, you can bring it back. And so,
Wow.
but I never once brought anything back because he was
Uh,
always like spot on with the stuff that he
yeah.
was recommending, and he still has just got amazing taste in the music. So yeah, I think that's something again that you lose when you don't have brick and mortar stores sometimes, and so you have to
Right.
kind of create a cult with the online stores and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
and people that you bump into on there, because you get to know who you trust and whose tastes align with yours. And I've found so many great things that are just recommended by friends that are social media friends. I think it's an amazing way to connect and to recommend stuff to people. I love it.
I think we hit upon the Keep, which Vinegar's just putting out finally, which I can't wait to see that movie because I've never been 100% into the Keep, but it's also because it's never been available in a version that I'd like to
Yeah,
see. So
yeah,
to see that in 4K, Michael Mann, supposedly a flawed masterpiece, can't wait to see that. And I guess the final thing to discuss, which is from Vinegar, which goes back to finding things that you haven't seen before. They released, I think it was a 1974 movie called Phase 4. That was the only movie directed by Saul Bass, who did a lot of title sequences. And I'd never seen the movie. I've heard of it, through the years, and I was like, oh, okay, it's sort of loosely based on H.G. Wells's Empire of the Ants, I think, what was based on.
yeah.
But again, it's just one of those things that just kind of slipped my mind. And they went in and they did a 4K scan of the theatrical, but there was a preview version that had an alternate ending or an extended ending. And so watching this movie, which is it's like a horror movie version of it's like an art house horror movie. It's literally very arty and odd and strange,
Hmm.
and I would have never seen it if it wasn't presented this way. And sometimes you get a little like, well, I want to see it in the best possible version, not the shitty version that isn't 4K or Blu-ray. It's one thing going to a repertory theater and watching a 35 millimeter print. It's another. It's like, let's give these films their due. Got to tell you, if you haven't seen Phase 4, it's 100% worth it. And they have 3 disc set. That's just it's you turn it on, you just like entranced at how fucking freaking great it is.
That's
So
great. That's great. Well, kudos to all these labels. And man, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing some of this with us, Anthony. I hope some folks are taking notes and going to check some of these releases out. And I'm excited for all this to come next year. I mean, there's so much that has been announced over the last couple of months that we'll be talking about down the road. Appreciate you coming on to chat for a few minutes, buddy.
You're very welcome. Talk to you soon, Justin. Thank you.
I just love Anthony's perspective on things. And he was a writer for Fangoria eons before I was. So we have a lot in common in terms of our backgrounds, and our bond was really fast years ago. And of course, it was an honor to get attacked in Sharknado. And I helped him out, I think, on Sharknado 3, bringing my buddy Bill Gibson's Christine movie car into that film. So we got a cameo from Christine in that. I've actually gotten Christine into a number of films and different videos over time, including actually when John Carpenter did a video for his redo of a theme from Christine a few years ago. He wanted to make a music video for it, and John and his team reached out to me asking, hey, don't you know a guy who has one of these cars? And I got them connected with Bill, and we got everything set up. And then Bill's car's in that video that you can find on YouTube. If you look up John Carpenter and Christine, take a look at that. And also, as an aside, be sure to check out Christine Movie Car on social media like Facebook. Bill is great at being interactive on there, and his car experience is one of a kind. I met Bill years ago when I was doing a feature, I think it was for Fangoria. Yeah, it was for Fangoria on Christine. And my approach with the article, instead of just rehashing the story of the production of the film, was to tell the story of the film in conjunction with the kind of crazy story of the 58 Plymouth Belvedere, Savoy, and Fury, and the forward look Plymouth movement that was happening at the time, because it's kind of a crazy story how that production house bumped their new cars earlier than anticipated to try to keep up with what was happening on the market, but they ended up kind of being rust buckets, famous for not being a real durable vehicle. And so they were prized in collector hands long before the movie Christine, or the book Christine, came out. But since then, this entire collector's market has cropped up where people are tracking down whatever rotting hull of a car they can find in a field somewhere and restoring them, painting them up like Christine, often doing the blacked out windows and all of that. But Bill's car offers a completely different experience. When you go to see it at conventions and car shows, you can sit in the car, and Bill has it rigged up to do a bunch of stuff that happens in the movie. Like you'll be sitting in there, and then the window will go up, the door locks go down, and then music starts playing on the radio. The cabin lights up green, and this fog can come rolling in, and then even your seat can come moving forward, like to crush you like it did with Darnell in the movie. So it's a great experience. Christine Movie Car, you got to check that out. And tying it to Anthony, it was really exciting to get that into that Sharknado film as well. And of course, the Carpenter music video was an honor beyond an honor to even be a tiny part of. So anywho, on to the voicemails from you guys. This first one here is from my buddy Greg Morgan, Grega Mortis from Land of the Creeps.
Justin Beahm, Gregor Mortis here, calling in for the last minute, of course. Favorite releases of 2024. I've got to say, just recently, and I haven't even received it yet, but I know it's going to be one of my favorites, is the Severin Canna Bundle, which come with Last Cannibal World, Eaten Alive, Slave of the Cannibal God, plus 2 shirts. That's certainly going to be on my list of pride for 2024. The other one too, and I think this is 2024, correct me if I'm not right on this one, but the Ronning flicks, when they released the Haunt from the Scott Beck, that one right there, man, you had something to do with that major, and I really, really love that release. Love the package and everything about that, and the Haunt looks so beautiful. But my favorite release I got this year was the Severin Opera Dario Argento release, the glasses it came with, Opera 4K, just all of that deep cuts from Argento, and it's just amazing, man. It was my best packaging and best release. So that's it, brother. Right now, I got many more stuff coming up in the future, but love you, dude. Hope you have a great show and great 2024 ending of the season. But then we got 2025 coming up, so who knows what's going to happen. But we love you, brother. Appreciate you, Pearl, and I love you. See ya. Peace out, my friend.
Greg Amortis, great to hear from you. As always, their Suspiria from a couple years ago. It took forever to land, but damn it, was it worth the wait, because that movie has never looked more beautiful than on that 4K. And that opera is super solid as well. What a great pick. The Canna Bundle from Severin, I just saw that announced, I think, on their Black Friday sale or something. What a great collection there. And thank you so much for your kind words on that Haunt box set. That was back a few years ago, but I think Ronin is still selling them at roninflix.com. That was an honor to be a part of. Scott, Brian, and I went absolutely nuts, packing that thing with extras, including the Tom and Andy soundtrack, which at that point wasn't available anywhere else. I think it's had a vinyl release since. But yeah, there's the reproduction of the map of the Haunt that's in the back room there in the movie. You have all kinds of great stuff in there. And so check that out. It's often part of their sales. There is a standard release of the movie as well that's available on Amazon, and I think that has quite a few of our extras on it. But the box set is really something to behold, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Mortis. It's one of my most prized projects from over the years, and I know Scott and Brian were just thrilled with how it turned out, too. Again, brother, thank you so much for calling. Really appreciate hearing from you. Look forward to being on LOTC again very soon. The next message is from my buddy Jack Christensen. He lives here in Iowa. He's a bassist, amazing musician. He also has a solo album that came out, I think, earlier this year. So check that out on Spotify and everywhere you listen to music. But let's hear what Jack has to say here.
Justin, this is Jack Christensen. I don't think I bought any brand new physical releases this year, but I think just about my favorite physical releases of all time is that Sleepaway Camp that you produced for Scream Factory. Peace, buddy.
Oh, man. Thank you, Jack, for calling. I appreciate that. And for the love on that Sleepaway Camp project. That was an incredible moment for me. That was huge for Reverend Entertainment. In fact, that's the first time that I put the Reverend Entertainment name on a release. At that point, I wasn't yet editing my own stuff, and I was sitting there with my buddy Justin Cruz, who is an incredible talent. He's edited tons of stuff. I think he's now working for DC doing their shows, rightfully so. I mean, he's supernaturally talented. But I was sitting there with Justin. We're cutting this thing together, and at one point at the end of it, we got to the credits, and he's like, what do we put here for your company name? And I was like, wait, I don't have a company name. It's just me. And he's like, well, you need a company name, so think about it. And we went to lunch and got back, and then I was like, you know what? Let's do this Reverend thing. Reverend Entertainment. Let's do that. And he's like, what's Reverend Entertainment? And then I had to tell him the whole story. If you've listened to previous episodes, I'm pretty sure I shared it before, but there's this crazy story behind that name. And so Reverend Entertainment it was. And then I sent it off to a friend of mine here in Iowa, Joe Zerl, who also made Cadaver Christmas, if you've seen that. Another great holiday movie that you should check out. I'm sure is streaming everywhere. But Joe was doing intro stuff for me at that time, intro animations. And he did the Sleepaway Camp intro for me. He also did the Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 and 2 documentary intros that I did on those releases for Shout Factory. And that part 1, the Silent Night, Deadly Night, has a 4K release that's landing, I think, maybe even today as I'm recording on December 10th. So check that out. I think there's a novelization available as a package option through Shout on that one. But anyway, it was so much fun to do this Sleepaway Camp release, and it was a full-fledged documentary back when Shout let me do that. Most of these companies have pivoted to individual interviews. I think it makes it look more stout on the back of the packaging when they do that. But I kind of miss the days of being able to get a bunch of interviews done and put them all together in one solid doc, which is why I'm doing my own documentaries now, doing my own outside stuff. And man, I can't say enough about Jeff Hayes up in New York, who runs Sleepaway Camp website. He is the torchbearer for all things Sleepaway Camp. And he has done a tremendous job over the years of keeping fans updated, pulling cast members out of the ether and getting them into conventions and things like that. He just had a Sleepaway Camp book, and I think even a little vinyl record of Angela's theme that came out earlier this year. And man, Jeff was the heart of that project. Jeff had access to literally everyone and helped bring those interviews in, and I'm so grateful for that. And Jack, for you, for calling in and bringing this title up. Yeah, it was a few years ago. Still waiting for that 4K release. I hope that can happen at some point. It could work because I found the original elements for that film. In fact, at the point where we were looking at it and I presented it to Shout, because I took this title to them, I was on a hunt for weeks trying to find original elements because nobody had any idea where any of it was. And I ended up finding them in some warehouse filed under a different production company name. But when they sent me, I mean, I was really going to the ends of the earth to try to find this stuff and getting really creative with my searching. And when the facility sent me the list of the elements they had, I couldn't believe it. It was all the original camera. I mean, it was like everything, audio, video. And so the Shout Factory Blu-ray that came out presented the film in its full form for the first time ever, even beyond that bargain bin DVD that had been out that had a little bit of extra footage in it. This has everything, and it turned out beautifully. Felissa Rose and Jonathan Tiersten were wonderful to offer their time for interviews as well as for commentary, which we did together. And, oh man, just great memories of a great time. It was such an exciting moment for me and for, like I said, Reverend Entertainment. And I look back at those days really, really fondly. And it's bizarre to think about all that's happened since. Just surreal. 10 years. Over 10 years now. Just wild. So, Jack, thank you so much, man. Next message here is from my buddy, Justin Powell.
Hey, Justin, it's your old pal Piz out here. So not to take up too much of your time, I wanted to share with you and your listeners my top 3 physical media releases of the year. At number 3, we have Severin's limited edition 4K release for Dario Argento's opera. I know there were some issues that required a disc replacement, but that aside, this is a definitive release for opera with stellar picture and sound quality and a plethora of new and old extras. At number 2, we have the limited edition 4K release for Trick or Treat from Synapse Films and Red Shirt Pictures. This one was worth the wait, sporting great picture and sound quality, beautiful packaging, and a highly entertaining and informative feature-length making of documentary. And at number 1, this one was a very long time in the coming, but definitely worth the wait. Second Sight's limited edition 4K release for The Hitcher sports phenomenal picture and sound quality, beautiful packaging, and awesome extras, both new and old. Some quick honorable mentions: Arrow Video's 4K releases for Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat and the Friday the 13th remake, Second Sight's The Blair Witch Project, and Vinegar Syndrome's The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3 sets. Thank you, Justin. Have a great holiday season. Take care.
Another vote for opera. That release is getting a lot of love. And that Trick or Treat, man, did Michael Felsher hit that out of the park or what in teaming up with Synapse for that? So many years in the coming. And you're going to hear a lot about this in the viewer comments coming up too. That is a title that has been on everyone's list forever. It's a wish list evergreen title that everyone thought never would happen. And of course, Felsher made that happen. And that's what Michael does. He makes things happen. Super proud of him and Red Shirt and grateful for Synapse doing that. And I think earlier I mentioned Severin doing the reissues there on the Argento stuff. I meant Synapse on those. They're the ones who have been tackling them and just doing a stellar job with them. And then that Hitcher set with Anthony brought that up too. That's another one that even Eric Red thought never would happen. And so one hell of a package from Second Sight on that. That's one of those, like I mentioned in the discussion with Anthony, that comes in a box with the book tucked in there and everything else. I mean, those things look amazing on the shelf. And I think that's vital these days, offering that little something extra that turns it from just being a collectible piece into a show piece. So kudos to Second Sight on that release. And thank you, Piz, for calling in. Really appreciate it, brother. Check out Piz Owl on YouTube. He has an amazing show where he and his brother do all kinds of fun stuff. And Justin always has entertaining guests on there, interviews. He does wonderful reviews. I mean, he didn't have the chance on this voicemail, but he gets really in depth with his breakdowns of different releases and movies and even toys and collectibles and things. So can't pimp him enough, man. Piz Owl on YouTube. The last voicemail is from Jake Boston, Steelbook Obsessed. You definitely need to be following him on YouTube, on Instagram, and everywhere else. Let's hear what Jake's picks are.
Hey, this is Jake Boston from Steelbook Obsessed, and you were asking, what is my favorite physical media release of the year so far? I love me my Steelbooks, but there is one release worldwide, collecting media in 2024. You can get it from all over the globe. And my favorite example to showcase off in 2024 is the Trust the Fungus box set from Umbrella Entertainment for Super Mario Brothers. That thing is such an encyclopedic version of a movie that I didn't think needed that treatment, but I'm so happy that we finally got it. If you don't have it in the collection, the purple version, the slightly bigger version sold out very quickly. They have a more condensed version that's still super beefy. And if you're a kid of the 90s who has love for that movie like me, then I would sincerely try to track that release down. Love the podcast, and keep on making amazing special features, man.
Jake, so great to hear your voice, brother. Thank you for calling in that Super Mario box. There's so much on there. You guys, it is almost ridiculous how much Umbrella poured into that thing. Umbrella, what can I say about Umbrella? I have been a part of a few releases of theirs over time, and there's going to be many more in the future. I actually can make the announcement at this point that I am going to be spearheading U.S. production for Umbrella now. So there's going to be a hell of a lot of titles coming up over the coming years that I have my hands directly involved with from A to Z. I'm loving teaming up with them. And after a couple months of meetings and stuff, we locked it all down about a week or two ago. Actually, it was on Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving night, technically. 7 p.m. our time. I had to have the call with them because, of course, the time difference with Australia. But we got everything pinned down, and I am moving into a new role with Umbrella that I couldn't be more excited about. What a tremendous label, and this release exemplifies that. Same thing with the Tank Girl that I did for them a couple months ago. It's another one of these boxes that look just incredible sitting on the shelf. In my office, I have a bookshelf that I got from my grandma that is really precious to me. And so I only put important stuff there. And what the first 5 shelves of it are all releases that I've produced, which has since overgrown into other shelving in the room. But every time a new title comes out, I put it facing forward in front of the other releases on those shelves, and Tank Girl proudly sits there, and it's going to be there for a long time just because it looks so amazing. And that's the same thing with this Super Mario set. I wasn't part of that, but damn, is it a good package. And I mean, people were laughing when it was announced because of how thorough it is, because of just how damn much stuff is on there. And that's a great pick, Jake. Fantastic pick. And now we'll pop into social media and see. I posed the same question to friends that I'm connected with there. Brandon Peters was the first to comment and said, "You're going to have to wait for my video, Justin, LOL. But spoiler, you have had a hand in a couple of them." Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. John Vandaloo says, "Too many to list. A lot of them have special features produced by you. Congratulations. Can't wait to see what 2026 has in store. Hopefully 2025 as well. I'm sure you know some titles we are all waiting for but can't announce yet." Yeah, there's always stuff in queue, John, and plenty more to come. Like I just mentioned, the Umbrella stuff, super exciting to be able to have influence from point A to Z on what's coming out on those releases with them. Jeff Williams, the last I purchased was Second Sight's The Blair Witch Project box. I'm very pleased with it. Yeah, that said, I know that there was a bit of a disc replacement issue there that they've taken care of. These labels usually are very, very good about that. But geez, it is the ultimate presentation of Blair Witch for sure. I remember Stephen King saying that Blair Witch was the scariest movie that he had ever seen. So if King gives it his thumbs up, it's legit. Corey Repetto says the Looney Tunes Collector's Choice Blu-rays. A lot of great shorts not released in HD for a cheap, affordable package. Also, the Scream Factory Steelbooks have been killing it recently. I really dig the Killer Clowns and Strangers artwork. Yeah, the Steelbook thing has been nuts. And Walmart's had a lot of exclusives on those too it's neat to have that alternate cover artwork. But yeah, Steelbooks, as Jake will attest, have been pouring out of so many different studios and distributors, especially over the last year. Eric Leckberg posted pictures of his 4 favorites. There's the JFK box set from Shout that I produced the features on. Thank you, Eric. The Outsiders is there, that Blair Witch box set, and then the Trick or Treat from Red Shirt and Synapse. Brian Godsill, we are living in a golden age of physical media with too many great things to list. Many thanks to people like yourself and the people keeping physical media alive. It's my honor, Brian, and thank you for your support of the show here. Herbie J. Pilato, my creative partner on the upcoming Bewitched Blu-ray box set from Mill Creek, says White Christmas. That's exciting. Another timely release. Beautiful movie. Sean Davis, Bringing Out the Dead was phenomenal. I really love that Hush is available in physical media format, and I'm stoked for the 4K release of Silent Night, Deadly Night. Thank you so much, Sean. Man, Bringing Out the Dead, I've talked a lot about it on the show. I won't harp on that anymore, but so honored. And it's exciting to see it on so many year-end best-of releases from like Variety and Vulture and some other media outlets that, they saw it, they caught it, and they're saying things like, this is a movie that has been underserved historically. This is the ultimate way to see it, and I couldn't agree more. And really, same thing on Hush that you mentioned, Sean. That was a real honor. The experience with Mike Flanagan was absolutely incredible. I think I shared the story behind that day, or those days rather, on an episode earlier in this season. But what a great release that is now available. Derek Room posts a picture here of Late Night with the Devil, which is an expansive box set there that looks like some postcards. You have a TV guide, a book, Conversations with the Devil, which of course featured in the film. What a great set and a great choice there. Eric Spudik says, I just bought Retro Media's release of Crowhaven Farm. Good old John Carradine. Ah, yeah, Carradine. You can't go wrong with him. I need to check that out, Crowhaven Farm. That's a film I'm unfamiliar with, Eric. But I love what Retro Media's been doing. Fred Olin Ray has been killing it with those releases. And he does a lot of them with an autograph on the back of the slipcover, which I think is a nice addition. We talk about those little add-ons that really mean something to fans, and that certainly goes a long way with me. Daniel Schweiger, who is featured in the Full Moon box set that I produced the features on for Umbrella this year, says, well, aside from my awesome friends who specialize in bonus features, it'll be impossible to beat Second Sight's release of The Hitcher among the titles I've gotten. Daniel does great liner notes for a lot of soundtrack releases too, so check out his work. I mean, he not only does he have a fascinating background with places like Full Moon, where he was behind the Video Zone segments, and in that box, but also he's a tremendous writer. In that box set, the first thing that I pitched to Umbrella was to do a featurette just about the video zones, because they meant so much to me when I was a kid, still do. I love watching through those, and it was a real treat to be able to tell the story behind the video zone, and Daniel was at the heart of that. Michael Coate posts a picture of his MVD release of 1982. Solid release. MVD is kind of a sleeper a little bit. They put out a lot of good stuff every year. Still, the ultimate release of the film Abominable, starring Tiffany Shepis. I love that movie, and I really treasure that MVD Blu-ray of it. Michael Challenor says The Hitcher and Trick or Treat 4Ks. Donald Platt, Trick or Treat. Shawscope Volume 3 and Haunts Be Ours Volume 2, which Anthony and I discussed a bit. Corey Hatfield says Preacher's Daughter. Ethel Cain on vinyl. The album is a couple years old, and the release doesn't actually drop until next year, but it was just made available to purchase for the first time the other day. I can't wait to get it. Hayden is an audiophile and no doubt took some insane precision to make the vinyl mix immaculate. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. Jacob Davison says, I don't even have it in my hands yet, but The Keep on 4K. A lot of people were excited about that. That's another one like Trick or Treat. It's kind of amazing. I think they were announced on the same day on Black Friday this year. or maybe Trick or Treat was a little bit before then, actually. But within a short span of time, 2 titles that had been on everyone's wish list forever were announced, and here we are. Eric Allen Veerhalter says, that's so hard for me to pick a favorite release of 2024. So many good ones got released this year. I couldn't agree more. Sean Francis says, The Keep, UHD. Eric Porn says, Trick or Treat. Derek Johns, I recently picked up the 4-disc set of Hush. So good, and noticed the book she wrote in the movie was called Midnight Mass. Very cool. Yeah, Mike and I talk about that in the interview that's on there, where he gets into some of the little nuggets that ended up becoming full-fledged films and other project concepts that are sprinkled throughout Hush. It's really, really fun stuff. Jewel Sane says Once Upon a Time in the West. Thank you, Jewel. That was a Paramount 4K release that I did special features on. Ali Chappelle says The Keep! ! Ralph Miller, the Prime Evils 3-disc Blu-ray set. I'll have to wait another 2 months plus before I have it in my hands because I made the mistake of pre-ordering it from Amazon because it didn't come out and that Full Moon would release it directly until after I had made the purchase. Oh well, in the meantime, I can watch the Prime Evils on Shudder. Prime Evils, boy, that sat back on the shelf forever. That came up a lot when I was talking to people for the Full Moon box set when I was doing those interviews because, obviously very close to that universe, and it's neat that that's finally finished and out there. I hope you enjoy it when it lands, Ralph. And then finally, Samuel Carmack, been a buddy of mine forever, says Once Upon a Time in the West looks and sounds phenomenal. Then maybe Trick or Treat. I got it mainly for the soundtrack. I saw it in the 80s and didn't think much of it, but the transfer is great. 2 long overdue releases there, Samuel. And thank you for mentioning Once Upon a Time. That project was a real treat to be part of. So there you have it. The best of 2024 physical releases from Anthony Ferrante and a whole slew of friends of mine. And I appreciate everyone reaching out and participating in that. There's a long list there. Of course, there are some titles that came up time and again that you're not going to want to miss, but really you can't go wrong with anything that you heard about here today. And I hope that you add those to your Christmas list, or certainly your buying list heading into 2025. You have been listening to the Radio Hour podcast. I am Justin Beahm, and my website is justinbeahm.com. Find me on all social media, well, on Facebook and on Instagram at least. Just look for my name, and the Radio Hour podcast is on both as well. And I look forward very much to connecting with you on the next episode. Until then, just want to remind you to be good to yourself and to each other. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour. The Radio Hour is a production of Reverend Entertainment, copyright 2024. All rights reserved.